Hello, it's nice to see you again. Starting today, we will be talking about relationships. First, I would like to introduce the personal network of an organization called Plan, which is featured in the book, The Happy Life. As I mentioned before, Plan is an organization that is a non-profit organization that was founded in Vancouver, Canada in 1989 to help with future planning and building personal networks. A personal network refers to a group of people who come together with the three main goals of ensuring the safety, health, and happiness of a child with disabilities, with that child at the center of the network. The biggest reason for starting such personal networks is not only because it is important to build relationships even before parents pass away, but above all, because it is the only answer to the question, who will take care of our child when we are gone? Here are some examples of the roles that members of a personal network can play. They check the programs or services that children with disabilities receive, actively advocate for their rights, serve as executors of wills, trustees, or advisors, become members who can give consent for power of attorney, provide immediate help when the child with a disability is in crisis, solve difficult problems when they arise, respond well to unexpected situations, and actually carry out the wishes of the parents. Building a personal network is not an easy task. That's why Plan hires people called community connectors to help build networks for children with disabilities. When families with disabilities join Plan, Plan helps them with future planning and building personal networks. There is a monthly fee for membership and for building the network. I'm not sure how things have changed now, but when we were involved with Plan, by 2015, Community Connectors, it took me about 5 to 6 hours to help build the network. The cost we paid was per month. I remember it being about $300 per month. The method for building a personal network is introduced in the book, so please refer to that. I will share my personal experience related to this and explain how I went about helping my child form friendships afterward. We joined Plan in 2015, and at that time my child had just graduated from high school. There were already about 60 to 70 families who had joined Plan, and all of them were older than us. Most of them were born and raised in Canada, so they had many relatives and neighbors, which made it relatively easier for them to build a personal network compared to my child. However, in our case, we had not been in Canada for very long, and our goal in building a personal network was not so much for after the parents' passing, but rather to find someone who could be a friend to my child right away. Because of this, it was difficult for us to easily establish such relationships. And wanting to introduce this kind of personal network, not only for my child, but also for other Korean families, we received help from Plan and conducted a pilot program with 5 families for about 3 years. All 5 families had children in their 20s, and the need for every family was not so much for after the parents' passing, but rather to form a friend group right away. As we tried something we had never done before, a group did form to some extent in the beginning, and we had many good times together. However, as time went on, since the members participating in the network were young adults, the frequency of participation gradually decreased, and it became difficult to sustain the group. The Community Connector also started out with a spirit of volunteering, but it seems it was not easy to build a strong network. Of course, there was some regret that 3 years was too short a period, but overall, it was difficult to keep going, so we decided to end it there. At that time, another thing I tried was to have my child participate in buddy clubs, run by several organizations. A buddy club is organized by a coordinator employed by the institution and usually meets about once a week, where children with disabilities gather together to have meals and participate in various activities. My child attended a few times but then stopped going. I assume it was probably because it wasn't fun, and perhaps also because it was difficult to form relationships. Above all, you can't force someone to attend those kinds of places. Of course, there are some kids for whom these buddy clubs are a good fit. But especially for those of us whose children are in their 20s, what they need right now is friendships, even more than preparing for life after their parents are gone. I spent a lot of time thinking about how I could help my child form these kinds of friendships. There were a few concerns I had while building a personal network. First, the network members are usually young adults, and it was not easy for them to regularly and consistently make time to play their roles as members. Although they joined us a few times, it was difficult for them to become regular members. They themselves seemed to be too busy dealing with their own situations to have any spare time. Second, the compensation that Community Connectors received was far too low. In our case, one connector was responsible for building a personal network for one child with a disability, and if they worked about 2 hours a week, totaling around 10 hours a month. The amount they received was only about $250 to $300, so it was hard to consider it a real job. And I think they probably started with the idea of volunteering. So I imagine it would have been difficult for them to continue working for a long period of time. While addressing these issues, we thought a lot about models that would allow children with disabilities to maintain friendships over time. The result was a model called group networking. The first challenge was how to continuously secure network members. At first, we considered creating a large pool of typical friends so that they wouldn't have to attend every time, but could take turns and only participate once a month. However, after much discussion, we concluded that this too would not be easy, so we decided to help our children with disabilities form friendships among themselves. Second, we decided to provide coordinators with compensation that would be sufficient for them to consider it a fair reward. This is because only then the coordinator continue this work with a sense of mission and passion. It also needs to be economically more attractive than other jobs for them to be able to continue. It would be difficult for a single child with a disability to bear this cost, but it became feasible if there were 4 or 5 participants. 5 families interested in this model gathered together, discussed the idea, and began group networking in January 2021. To briefly introduce, there are 5 children with disabilities participating, and each pays $500 per month. The group consists of 3 men in their 20s and 2 women. This amount can be paid using CLBC's CI funding in the form of individualized funding. He receives $2,500 per month. All expenses incurred other than the coordinator's salary are covered individually by each participant. The coordinator plans all activities that the group does together once a week, as well as activities that take place on a monthly or yearly basis. If necessary, the coordinator also meets or talks with individuals one-on-one. The range of activities is truly diverse. Birthday parties are a given, and they also plan and carry out various activities that regular friends might do together, such as attending different events, watching movies, and going on trips. Not only the children, but also the parents actively participate. Close communication among parents is necessary, and relationships within families are also important. Encouragement and active support for the coordinator are also necessary. Group networking is a completely different concept from day programs or doing certain activities for a few hours a week. The goal of each group is to become genuine friends. As I am filming this YouTube video in January 2025, it has already been 4 years since we started group networking. So far, including myself, our children, families, and even the coordinator, I believe it has been very successful. Of course, group networking does not encompass all of our children's relationships. Each person has their own relationships and their own life. However, even though each person has their own relationships, there is no group that fits the concept of friends as we commonly think of it. Group networking is about creating this kind of friend group. Based on this successful experience, I believe it is best to start group networking as early as possible. So, since 2023, we have started group networking for elementary school students. I will provide a more detailed introduction about this next time. In addition, the need for personal networks, which I introduced first, still remains. In other words, rather than just a peer friend group, it is necessary to build a personal network that can take care of a child with disabilities after their parents are gone. For this, help from siblings, relatives, and neighbors is needed more than from peers. However, for immigrants like us, there are often few relatives nearby, and especially in cases where there are no siblings. Such personal networks become even more necessary. Even if it's not a formal personal network like Plan, parents should, while they are still healthy, look for people around them who can care for their child in the future and build a network. You can also find such people in religious communities like churches. Of course, it's not easy. That's why organizations like Here Now need to serve as a support network and help each other. I believe this is something we need to keep thinking about. For today, I'll end my talk here. Next time, we'll invite a coordinator and a parent who have participated in this group, networking over the past 4 years, and hear directly about their experiences and thoughts. Thank you very much for watching until now.